So today begins a small series on the core Christian character quality, humility. I want to share with you 6 very good reasons why you need to watch this series on humility, but you need even more to do it. So don't just watch this, don't just listen, don't just read. Take it out and do it. Without humility, you could not have entered the way of salvation. You'll see this in this series. We'll explain why these things are true. Without humility, you cannot continue to receive God's grace. Without humility, your prayers will not be answered. Without humility, you have no fellowship, only strife and using people to your own will. Without humility, you cannot obey God. Without humility, you will not be saved. We're going to first talk about Moses and just see how humble he was. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 3. I'm in the Apostles' Bible because it's the Old Testament. It's more reliable than the King James because it's based on the Septuagint, which is the most reliable Old Testament manuscripts. So here we see that he's out with his father-in-law Jethro feeding the flock. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flaming fire out of the bush. And he saw that the bush burned with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will go near and see this great sight, why the bush is not consumed. And when the Lord saw that he drew near to see, the Lord called him out of the bush, saying, Moses, Moses. And he said, What is it? And he said, Draw no closer. Loose your sandals from off your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. Let's just stop there a minute, because here's this concept that there is some location that is holy. We often think that only God is holy, but God makes certain things holy, like it refers to his holy angels, for example. The angels are created beings, and yet they are made holy. Or the holy saints, right? Saints themselves mean ones who are holy. So that's what that word means. So this ground was declared holy by God, and Moses was commanded to take off his sandals because it was holy. Verse 6, and he said, Moses said, no, and God said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses turned away his face, for he was afraid to gaze at God. Now this is another interesting thing, because how many of us would turn our face away if God spoke and said who he was? Our curiosity that has been nurtured in us from birth would cause us to want to look into the face of God. And yet if we did, we would die. We would do that lacking reverence for God. So that's what's being conveyed here. It's something completely different than what we're used to. Verse 7, and the Lord said to Moses, I have surely seen the affliction of my people that is in Egypt, and I have heard their cry caused by their taskmasters, for I know their affliction. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land, and to bring them into a good and wide land, into a land flowing with milk and honey, into the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Girgashites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. So don't be afraid by all those names of these different peoples that you've never heard of before. Let's focus on this a minute. He said that the affliction of his people, that he's heard their cry. But Moses has been in the desert 40 years now. So it's taken God 40 years to hear the cry? No. Because it wasn't based on Moses that he heard the cry of his people. Probably after Moses left, it got much worse, and increasingly worse with the years, to where God finally said, I'm going to do something about this. It's too far. So he came to a man who he knew had this righteous indignation about the situation. Okay, let's go on. So verse 9. Let me find my cursor. There we go. Verse 9. And now behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the affliction with which the Egyptians afflict them. And now come, I will send you to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and you shall bring out my people, the children of Israel, from the land of Egypt. Now here God is saying, I'm going to send you to one of the most, if not the most powerful man in one of the most, if not the most powerful nation on the planet, from where you fled and are wanted for murder. I'm going to send you back in there. What would you say? I know what I would say. Lord, I'm a wanted man. They're going to throw me in prison or execute me. What would you say? Lord, how will I do that when that is the tightest nation on earth? Best military, strongest nation. How am I going to do that? You're going to want to know the Lord's plan before you go. What would I really do? Just as I do now. I would say, yes, Lord. I don't understand, but yes, Lord. Let's read on. And Moses said to God, verse 11, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and that I should bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt? Who am I, that I should do that? Who am I, that I should do that? Verse 12, And God spoke to Moses, saying, I will be with you. It's very important, don't miss it. I will be with you. And this shall be the sign to you, that I shall send you forth. When you bring out my people out of Egypt, then you shall serve God in this mountain. Hold on a minute. How can that be the sign that God sends him forth? Doesn't he need that sign beforehand? We would. If he says, I'll give you the sign after you do it. Well, thanks, but, I need a sign beforehand. No, you don't need a sign beforehand. You need confirmation after you've done it. You step out in faith, and then I confirm. You don't get confirmation before you step out in faith. You get it after you step out in faith. So when God calls you into some transaction, into some state, into some situation, and it seems unreasonable to you, counter-cultural to you, from the culture of your family, the culture of your church, the culture of your people, or common sense in the world, any of those, and you say, Lord, this makes no sense. He's not going to confirm it before you step out in faith. But when you step out in faith, then he will confirm it. That's what's going on here. And God spoke to Moses, saying, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you, that I will send you forth. When you bring out my people out of Egypt, then you shall serve God in this mountain. Verse 13. So he's guaranteeing that he will be successful at bringing the people out of Egypt. It's not them serving him at the mountain. It's the fact that they were able to, that they weren't killed in the process of trying to get out of Egypt. That's what he's indicating. That will be the sign. The sign will be that you'll make it out of Egypt back to this mountain to serve me. Verse 13, and Moses said to God, behold, I shall go forth to the children of Israel, and shall say to them, the God of our fathers has sent me to you. And they will ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? 14. And God spoke to Moses, saying, I am the being. And he said, thus shall you say to the children of Israel, the being has sent me to you. All right, now that's a little weird, okay? So I'm going to check that out in the original language. I think it may be a bad translation of it. Let me check. So here's what I found. It is what it is. I found that all of these versions have gotten it wrong. Sorry. And I'm not surprised because this is a critical passage that's used quite often in teaching. So if you look at the King James, it says, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. So there's only one I am in that entire verse. That's it. It doesn't exist anywhere else in that verse in the Greek. And I'll show you in a minute. Look at Green's literal. It's similar as well. So something happened to my brightness on my screen. One moment here. Brightness is there. I'm not sure why. So again, they say, I am that I am, copying the King James. And then I am over here towards the end as well. If you look at the Apostles' Bible, you've got the being, which is a very strange way of translating, because it says exactly I, and the verb to be, and the first person singular. I am. It literally says that. So in this way, they're completely off. They're trying to make it into something that wasn't in the text. So let's look at the text a minute. You'll see here's the word I. You can see over here. On the side here, you'll see the translation. So there it is. There's I, ego, and Amy, which is, that's to be. So, and you can see down here, if I can get my cursor there again, this is the parsing of that verb. That means that's the specific verb it is. So it says first person singular right here. So it's to be first, I am. So this is the I, this is the I am. So I am. So that's the only place this occurs in the entire verse. You can look through here, you can pause the video and look through for yourself. It's not here. So all three of these have translated it unfaithfully. So I'm going to translate it the way it actually says it. And I'll show it to you here. Okay, let me go ahead and switch that over to Notepad. Should be able to see that. There it is. So, and the God says toward Moses, yes, this is the God. And the God says toward Moses, I am. Also he who says in this way, you will quarrel, yes, quarrel, to the sons of Israel, he who stood me apart for you. That's literally what it says. Okay? So there's only I am once in the whole thing, and it's just I am. Now, you could translate that maybe I am being. And I've done that sometimes, but only under rare circumstances, and there's no need for it here. It doesn't need to be that way. In fact, the name, the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, which is the name of God recorded in the Hebrew Bible, which isn't faithful anyway. So we're not sure that that's exactly what it was, but that's what we take to be the name of God. It doesn't have the vowels recorded because the recording of it before the vowels or written were just consonants, YHWH. And they used to substitute the word Adonai, which means Lord, when they'd read it, because it was too holy to say. So they'd be reading, and there's the name of God, they'd say Adonai, which means Lord. So in your Bibles, especially the King James, they'll put all capital letters, Lord, whenever that name appears. So when you see that, you know that that's the personal name of God, Yahweh, or as it used to be called, Jehovah. Okay? So what it is, it's a word that is very close to that verb, I am. So what God is saying is that he has no God who created him. He has no parents who gave birth to him, and there is no force that gave rise to him. He is simply by his own existence. That's why it's his personal name. He's the only thing that is by his own existence. That's what's being captured there. That's what he's telling Moses. Whether Moses understood it or not, that's another question. So I know that this is about the humility of Moses, but I just want to finish off with this about the name of God. So verse 15, it says, "And God said again to Moses, Thus shall you say to the sons of Israel, The Lord God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is his name forever, and my memorial to all generations." Now notice, it's his name forever. Not until Jesus comes and then it's not his name. Or not until a certain generation. It says, my memorial to all generations. And when Jesus says that he has given the disciples the name of the Father, well, you can't get around that. So now let's go on to chapter 4 and have a look at what happened with Moses here in his response. So Moses continues with his doubt about his own powers. Because it's not about Moses' powers. And yet Moses still didn't quite get that. So he says, "And Moses answered and said, If they do not believe me and do not listen to my voice, for they will say God has not appeared to you, what shall I say to them?" So we have the same problem whenever we say that God spoke to us. People will say, "Oh, well, you never saw God. You never heard God. God didn't speak to you. What shall I say then?" So here's what God told Moses. "And the Lord said to him, What is this thing that is in your hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. And the Lord said to Moses, Stretch forth your hand and take hold of its tail. And he stretched forth his hand and took hold of the tail, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe you that the God of your fathers has appeared to you, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." So, here are miraculous things that God does to convince Moses that he will be with him in power and strength. So God says, if they don't listen to the first sign, surely they'll listen to the second sign. And if they don't listen to both these signs, then I'll give you a third sign to do. And then Moses responds in verse 10. "And Moses said to the Lord, I pray, Lord, I have not been sufficient in former times, neither from the time that you have begun to speak to your servant. I am weak in speech and slow-tongued. And the Lord said to Moses, Who has given a mouth to man? And who has made the very hard of hearing and the deaf, the seeing and the blind? Have not I, God? And now go, and I will open your mouth, and will instruct you in what you shall say. And Moses said, O Lord, I pray, appoint another able person whom you shall send. And the Lord was greatly angered against Moses." So, let's just talk about this a minute. Here's Moses continuing to make excuses after God pointed out that he's the one who makes people slow of speech, or with good speech. He's the one who makes people see and blind. So then he tells him to go, and Moses complains again. That's what makes God angry with Moses. Moses wasn't sufficient, either before or since God began to speak to him. He's weak in speech, slow-tongued. I myself had a speech impediment when I was a child. In second grade, I had to go into a broom closet with a speech therapist during the beginning of class, and then come into the middle of class when we were finished. It was very embarrassing. So, in spite of that, most of my adult life has been working and ministering with the use of speech. In fact, my first profession was as a linguist in the military. So, I've been a singer for a very long time, and I've written many songs. I was a radio announcer for 4 years. I've been a teacher for decades, doing public speaking. I even spoke on behalf of the Attorney General for California, the candidate for the office, when he was not able to be in both places at once because I was his campaign manager. And so I've done a lot of public speaking. And now here I am making these videos as well. So in spite of the impediment, the Lord has given me what I need in those times to do that. It doesn't mean I'm not nervous. I'm terribly nervous when I'm in front of people. Oh, very nervous, very weak, and I'm not quick-tongued. I can go deep, but I have to have a few seconds to think about it. I can't just boom, 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 boom. I'm not like that. You hear me stuttering sometimes. I had a stutter for a long time when I was a little child. So I understand Moses. I get Moses. I understand why he was so reticent to go forward with this. So how do I know that the issue of him being wanted in Egypt was an issue? Well, because it actually mentions it here. God has him wait until that king dies off. You'll see that here. It says, verse 19 or verse 18, it says, and in those days, after some time, the king of Egypt died. 19, and the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go, depart into Egypt, for all that sought your life are dead. So that was an important issue, and God saw that, and he caused the timing to happen just right, so that Moses wouldn't have that opposition. So here's Moses, who is complaining because of his deficiencies, and he complained too far, to the point where he angered God. But God still didn't back off from sending him. And God provided in every way. Every problem that Moses brought up, God provided for that. And that's true of us also. If we are humble and remain humble, and God is calling us to do something, we must still remain humble. But understand that God is going to go ahead and make up for that deficiency. Now, there's one other verse that a lot of people point to, which is Numbers 12:3. And the man Moses was very meek beyond all the men that were upon the earth. Let's look at the King James also. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And Green's literal. And the man Moses was very meek, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. Now some people say that means humble, but no, it's only figuratively humble. It actually is literally gentle or meek. So Moses was the most meek, or the meekest man on the face of the entire earth at that time. Meek does not mean weak. It means showing weakness where you are strong. So that's meek. You're strong, but you show this meekness where you are strong. You could show a greater strength, but you're showing this weakness that is in the face of your strength. That's meekness. So that is interesting, but that definitely feeds into the issue of humility. So Moses was able to hold back his strength to be gentle towards others. And he was the most at doing this on the face of the earth. This is the core Christian quality. And we'll find that as we get into the other examples in the New Testament, as well as more of the Old Testament. May the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.
Remember to subscribe down below and like the video and share it on your Facebook and other social media. And then make a comment, whether a question or a comment. We read all of them, and we try to respond to all. Get on over to our website, The Rooted Word, and start reading the translation and also the articles we've posted. It's at therootedword.com, therootedword.com. And may the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.